Meeting at the crossroads where religion and politics intersect, we talk about those two forbidden subjects here on the Sophie Scholl Society. With me today, you've seen him before, Tim Hagberg, and with him is his son, James. And this is post-election, and James, was this your first one?
Yes, it was.
Your very first election. What a first one to step into. And you made that a special event in your life. How did you make it special?
Well, in kind of the, to honor American democracy, I made sure I dressed up. I wore my best suit and tie. I walked into the polling office as proudly as I could, and I cast my vote for the candidate who I believe would enact policies in the best interest of America.
And did people look at you strange wearing a suit?
They did not, no. I only got positive feedback.
Hey, that's great. So as you stepped into it the first time, you went into that voting booth informed.
I believe so. I've always been interested in politics. I was really first introduced in politics back in 2016. I could not vote that year, obviously, but I remember first watching the early Republican and even some of the Democratic candidate debates. And I was really just the first time being introduced to these things. I'd never thought about any of the subjects before. And it was just fascinating for me. And I've spent the last 4 years informing myself to the best degree of not just politics, political science, and along with a lot of historical context.
And you are a historian. It seems like you have a real interest in American history.
Well, history is by far my preferred subject, both academically and recreationally.
And how did history shape your vote?
It's actually, I would say, quite a bit, because learning about history, and not only politics, has allowed me a better understanding of how policies can affect the world and our country as a whole. Because you can really see history repeat itself and play out, and you can see the causes and the effects that they have. And so with a better understanding of not just politics, economics, and history, I was able to the best of my abilities. Obviously, I'm only one individual, and this is my personal opinion. I believe I was able to be far more informed of both sides going into this election.
Interesting, both sides. So you studied each of the candidate.
Absolutely. For years, especially the last few years, I've done my best to approach politics not with a specific bias. I've really tried my best to listen to both sides, and that is a difficult thing to do, especially in America currently. And I tried to listen to both sides and to understand them and to make the best judgments that I could. I ran into some problems with that, but I did find some success, and I found individuals on both sides who are willing to speak with me and compromise. And unfortunately, I feel like that's rare. And in my opinion, I only saw one candidate who would really put the needs of the nation at the forefront of their presidency, and so I voted accordingly.
Yeah. So it's interesting. You talked with both sides. You had discussions and dialogue with people on the opposite sides, in other words.
Absolutely. And I believe, to a degree, that's what needs to happen in democracy, because there will always be opposing sides in any system. I mean, even within our own side, there would be small factions that might not agree on everything. And we have to be able to listen to different opinions and different views, and to the best of our abilities, without compromising on our core beliefs and our values, we need to be able to listen to these people and try to work something out where both sides can be satisfied while also benefiting everyone.
I can tell that you've been well educated in this matter, and you go into it informed. It seems to me you've had some good teaching growing up. Isn't that right, Tim?
Yes, he has. And that would be my wife. That's what credit is due.
All right. Because James was homeschooled?
I was, yes.
Yeah. And Tim, I really appreciate what you did regarding your homeschool, a certain philosophy you had about the education of your children. You educated, and your wife, 3 of them, correct?
Yes.
And what kind of perspective did you come from when you educated them?
That is the duty of the parents to education of the children, bring them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord. And that because the Bible is true, absolutely true, that the worldview, it just makes sense to me. Everything I see unfolding around me makes sense in the context of Scripture. And more sense every day.
Yeah, more sense every day. And like you say, from a worldview or context of Scripture, which is not happening in government-run schools.
No, I would say not. And that's one of the things that, when it comes to this election, the post-election direction we're heading, I had so much hope for school choice in the inner city for the African-American community that I'm really concerned. That was one of the big issues for me with voting was, allowing that opportunity for the African-American community to have school choice.
Yeah, and for me, Trump had the plan for them, rather than Joe Biden and his plan to control education, which seems to be
Charter
indicative.
Schools are, they're dead on arrival, so is school choice. It would seem in a Biden administration, from what I understand.
Right. Now, you guys voted in Pennsylvania, and certainly Pennsylvania has been in the news. What have been your thoughts as you've watched your state deal with this issue?
Embarrassment. National, the world, embarrassment in the world. And, we started out with count every vote. I'm good with that. Let's count every vote. Until one candidate took the lead, stop, no need, concede, move on. And I'm still with the count every vote and count every legal vote.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Count every legal vote. Because to me, there's anomalies, irregularities, and suspicious activity that has taken place, especially since election night.
Without being judgmental, Mel, do you want the fate of the free world dependent on folks who cannot seem to have had 4 years and not seem to postmark a ballot on time? I struggle with that.
I do too. Or in other states, they don't know to put a stamp on the envelope, but since they're in a ballot, we'll count them anyways. That kind of thing, to me, compromises the integrity of the vote. And you know what else I seem to notice? The more technologically advanced we get, the more complicated voting becomes.
Yes.
The more room we leave for error, fishy activity, as well as fraudulent activity. What happened to the good old-fashioned way of going to those machines, or simply casting an absentee ballot where you have to take the initiative yourself and request one? Any comments?
Yeah, it seems like it could have been handled differently. I would have been fine with certain areas opening up voting booths, say 2 weeks. In advance, call, make a reservation, make an appointment, go in, vote in person.
Yeah, very good. I think that's okay, but it seems also we're finding out that states are voting earlier and earlier, as well as counting later and later. That's not good for our democratic process to be done in a way that maintains integrity.
Well, there are strange times, and this was a unique situation with the pandemic and all, but what I struggle with is the candidate saying, oh, it's over, we've called it, the Associated Press and other news outlets who don't call the elections, calling the elections. Let's just wait. We have a process. Let's let the process run its course and see what happens.
Yeah, we do have a process because November 3rd was the political process. And since then, now we're going to engage in the legal process and let it take its course. What's everybody afraid of with having the legal issues dealt with in the court of law? Interesting, the mail-in ballots, they seem to be much more in quantity this year than any year before. Huge volume. And I was listening to Glenn Beck, and he said that on average, you'll have 1% of them be rejected. If you're a first-time mail-in voter, on average, 3% get rejected. So far in Pennsylvania, only 0.03% have been rejected, which to me raises a lot of red flags. What's going on here? Why the sudden decrease in percentage of those votes being rejected? Something isn't right. And I can't help to bring this back to history. When we look at our Mayflower Compact, didn't realize this, but just this past week, on November 11th, it was the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower Compact. And in that compact, they designed a government for just and equal laws. Mark Levin made a point. He said, where's the equal protection of the vote in this election? For example, mail-in ballots. In some places, the signature may not even need to match what the original signature was. If you cast a legal vote, if you were a citizen who did your duty in going to the polling place on that Tuesday, cast your vote, and have a vote that is compromising a legal vote, that subjects your vote to violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. I thought Levin made a great point.
No, I don't even know what the penalty is for voter fraud, but as an American, when you think of the Veterans Day has just come and gone, the sacrifice to have our system, what should the penalty be for fraudulent voting? Does anyone even know? I know I looked it up in Pennsylvania. I can tell you what it is not, but I could not tell you what it is. It is not more than a $15,000 fine. It is not more than 3 years in prison. But it, in nowhere is it specified to be a certain amount. So really, apparently, it's up to the judge to have discretion to, but blatant, if such a thing happened, and I
Correct.
don't know that it did.
We don't know.
I'm not even saying that it did. I'm saying there are these anomalies that need to be looked at. But if such a thing did happen, what would be a proper penalty for submitting 100 votes for an individual who did something to that effect?
Right. I think that's a good question that should be
should have been answered before the election.
Yeah. Or the situation that involved watchers over the count who were distanced from observing.
Why would you do that? Why would you do that? And if that happens and it's not legal, then what's the penalty? Do you know the penalty? I know what it's not.
I noticed.
I don't know what it is.
I mean, to me, that ought to.
And that was just a quick test on Wikipedia. I'd ask our audience, what is the penalty in New York State for voter fraud? Does anyone know?
Right. Not that we've. Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. Not being a battleground state, I'm sure we're not in touch with that, like Pennsylvanians would be.
But the citizen that you robbed of his voice. Mm-hmm. What do you owe that individual? What do you owe society?
I think that's a very good question. Because you are robbing that citizen of a legitimate vote. And what is the just penalty for such robbery? Very good. Wow. In addition to what we've been seeing, not only in Pennsylvania, you hear about it in Nevada, such as the signature checker, which supposedly was done electronically, was lowered to such an extent that basically made that checker non-existent at all. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of Clark County in that situation. By the way, a heavily populated blue state or blue region of that state. And it just seems to me, if you guys want to comment, all these issues seem to arise out of blue state areas, blue state cities. It's all blue, all Democrat. leftist. That's where the problem seems to always be rooted.
And also, I would point out that of all of the irregularities, because we have no proof of actual fraud, we have no proof of any overarching scheme by the DNC to steal the election as of this point. But another interesting thing that we've discovered with all of these major irregularities across, which are really only happening in battleground states, and the states that will decide the election. Not only have they mostly almost all originated in Democratic counties, but every single one has been a mistake in favor of Joe Biden. There has not been an instance where 6,000 votes for Joe Biden was switched to Donald Trump. There were 6,000 Donald Trump votes switched to Joe Biden. Now, we caught those. Those were caught. I believe those were in Michigan.
Yep.
And they were able to revert those votes. I would also like to point out that the voting software, the machines that they used in that specific instance, that through an error switched over 6,000 votes, is used not only in 40 other counties in Michigan, but also in 30 other states, and almost every other battleground state currently being contested.
Right, and I think it is a worthwhile thing to do to make sure those are checked and, if necessary, rechecked. Because what we're hearing, like you say, we don't have proof of massive voter fraud, but enough suspicion is out there. Right. I think we should let the courts take the process and see it through.
And really, I don't want to slough off any voter fraud if such exists.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think it needs to be rooted out, and I think it needs to be dealt with.
Absolutely. Even in states that aren't battleground states. And the integrity of the vote is the priority, not so much even the candidate we chose or chose not to vote for this time around. I think it's good to put pressure on those who are running this by way of big tech or technology, which seems to be opening itself up to possible massive fraud. And I think, too, that as we let the legal process take its course, we'll be satisfied with the results that come from it. I don't anticipate.
Might not be happy.
But then again, we won't be on the streets stampeding, rioting, looting.
Yeah. I think that's also something important, that a difference that I've seen in the Republican and the Democratic parties is, if Joe Biden wins, which he may very well, I mean, it's very well possible that Joe Biden has won. And if Joe Biden has won fairly, I think he deserves congratulations. Mm-hmm. He is our commander-in-chief. Yep. I will respect him, and I would defend him against any threat as my president. If he won fairly, and I want to know who won fairly. And that is, I believe, the core argument that I think most Republicans are making. We're not trying to steal this election because we dislike Joe Biden. We're trying to investigate abnormalities because we've never seen these before. This has never happened in any other election. If it was happening and they were all favoring Donald Trump, by all means, we should at least find out what's going on. We want a accurate count of all of the legal votes, and when we have that, Republicans will be satisfied. We're not going to riot. We will accept it, and we'll go back to work.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see as time proceeds that if the left sees this process take its course, what kind of pressure will they exert on the streets? Will there be rioting? Will there be demonstrations that will turn violent? I think we just need to be prepared for that.
I have a question for you, Mel.
Yeah.
I'll throw it in here. Why did Hillary Clinton tell Joe Biden not to concede under any circumstances when all the polls had him up by
Correct.
10%? Something is not right. There's several things that just don't add up.
Right, and we didn't even get to the polling. I mean, the polling was way off going into this election. There were very few who were accurate, like the Trafalgar Group. But when you see all those mainstream polling places or outfits get it wrong like they did, it brings into that discussion the question, why did Hillary say to Biden not to concede? Yeah. Good. Any thoughts more?
No, just as a Christian, the message doesn't change. Jesus is the Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. Doesn't matter who's down here on earth. The Lord raises kings up. He sets them down. He's in charge. And no one can stay his hand, as Nebuchadnezzar says. And no one can ask him, as Job said, what are you doing? We'd like to, but we shouldn't. And our job is because all things work together for those who love him. Our job is to love him, and the message for the believer doesn't change, regardless of who the Lord allows to take this position.
Amen. I think it's good. James, anything you want to add before we close out the show today?
I would also, something I just heard earlier today, which I'm sure, not for the first time, mind you, but myself and millions of other Americans, that I found rather interesting, was I believe it was the first presidential debate. The closing question asked to Vice President Biden was, would he wait to proclaim victory in the election until it was independently certified and it was official? And would he ask his constituents and the Democratic Party to remain calm, to wait, and to allow the electoral process to play out? Joe Biden's response was very clear. Absolutely. He was very adamant about making sure every legal vote is counted and to wait until the process has been finished. What happened to that? I can't say.
Thanks, James, for those words. And I'm really impressed with a young man like James, so informed like he is, sharing his thoughts after he voted for the first time in a suit there in Warren, Pennsylvania. And I think, too, I've heard a Christian say, count every vote. Now, I know he's on the left side. I just had to put count every legal vote. So with that being said, I'm glad you joined us today for the Sophie Scholl Roundtable.